welcome to Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. This show is dedicated to asking tough questions for you, the viewers. We bring you their responses, and we let you decide. Joining us here today at our MCTV studios as we continue our coverage with Get to Know the Candidates who are seeking your vote for the First Essex District Senate seat. Joining us here today, Kathleen O'Conner Ives. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Hector.
Thank you. For those viewers that don't know who you are, tell us, who is Kathleen O'Conner Ives?
Absolutely. I'm originally from, born in Boston and raised in Chelsea, Malden, and Burlington, Massachusetts. And I eventually settled down in Newburyport. I'm a North Shore person by nature, so we moved there. And my mom, she taught in the Chelsea public schools for 37 years. And my father, he's a carpenter to this day. My older brother recently retired from the Air Force after being there for 25 years serving. So we're happy to have him home. My younger sister is in Woburn, and she is married to a police officer and has a new little baby. So my husband, he works at the New England Aquarium, and we've been together 12 years. I actually met him campaigning up in New Hampshire. My first job out of college was volunteering for Al Gore's presidential campaign. And what I studied in college was environmental studies, and I was really passionate about it. So for me, I tried to brainstorm about what would be the most useful thing I could do with my time after college. So I went right up to New Hampshire in the Salem, Derry, Londonderry area and helped to organize. And I stayed on that campaign all the way through Massachusetts to moving to Nashville. I actually went down to Florida during the recount, and I helped organize affidavit intake centers for people that said they voted for Gore and their votes weren't counted. I counted Chads, and I stayed till the end of that situation. And it was an eye-opening experience in terms of what it really meant to be involved in the whole process, and how if you don't work to protect that, someone might try to take it away. So that was really eye-opening for me and kind of set me on my life's path to staying involved in campaigns and public service and trying to stay involved with government, because it proved to me that it made a huge difference. Since that did not work out, per se, as we all remember, I moved right back up to Massachusetts, and I worked on Steve Grossman's campaign for governor, and that was in 2001. And I was his deputy campaign manager, and that was a wonderful opportunity to meet residents throughout the whole state and talk about the issues. We did a lot of organizing. After that, campaigns are what they are, and they're all or nothing. And I realized I would benefit from a legal education, so I went to law school down in New York, and I spent 3 years in law school in White Plains, New York, because they had an environmental studies program. And it was definitely a good use of my time, but again, I knew I would come right back to Massachusetts, and I did that. And I took the Mass bar, and it was interesting because I wanted to move to a place that was close to my family, but was commutable for my husband to get to work. Newburyport fit the bill. And it was interesting because I started researching the issues that mattered in our community even when I was still in law school, just to get informed on things. And we had some serious environmental challenges. We had a landfill. We had issues with historical preservation. And it was something I just wanted to get involved in ASAP. So interestingly, as soon as I came to Newburyport, I pulled papers to run for city council. And I never thought in a million years that it would actually work out. But I figured that you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I knocked on almost every door in Newburyport. And to this day, I can still kind of think, you live on this street and you live on that street. It worked out. I ran against 10 people for an at-large seat, and I came in 4th out of the 5 open seats. And I've been on the council for the past 5 years. It's been really good. And I really enjoy this process of working with the people that we live with. And it's bread and butter issues. It's, you know, the sidewalks. It's, you know, trying to help your constituents when they call you and say, I have a problem with my water bill, my assessment's wrong, you know, kind of matching people up with the right people they need to be with. I really enjoy that. And I also enjoy this process of trying to figure out, at a city you call it an ordinance, but it's really legislation. And we have the opportunity and the responsibility as counselors to write legislation or not support it if it doesn't make sense. That whole process set me on this path of wanting to continue to be involved.
Great. Let me ask you, now you're getting involved into the First Essex Senate seat, which deals with the whole entire state as far as legislation is concerned. Why the First Essex Senate seat?
This was something I was not anticipating doing, actually. The seat opened up, and I realized that I have a small business right now that I'm running, and I had launched that, and things were going really well. But I realized, you know what, it's worth this, because what I see I can do to help is bring a perspective where, because there are 6.5 per se communities in our district, I really feel like I have the capacity to represent everyone, because I approach issues with an open mind. And at the end of the day, you do have to take a position on things, and I believe voters deserve that. So you listen to what the concerns are, and I really do have a sincere best interest in the work that I'm doing. And then you have to take a stance on the issues and give voters an informed decision to make.
What is your first plan if you're elected? What would be your first piece of legislation that you would bring forward on behalf of the constituents of the First Essex District if you were to be elected?
I think that the critical priorities that we're dealing with right now are really in terms of public infrastructure. In each of our communities, I feel like that's the common thread that we need to address. And that stems from a lack of funding, a lack of the right priorities in terms of how that money is spent. I think that one of the critical aspects of reforming our revenue is figuring out, in terms of corporate tax giveaways and corporate loopholes, what can we do to close those out? Because sometimes corporate subsidies are given, and the intent is, okay, maybe this is going to be a boost to our economy, maybe it's going to create jobs. But I support efforts that are underway right now that tracks those to make sure that they still make sense for us and hold those businesses accountable. Are they going to deliver the jobs? What types of jobs? Are they good paying jobs? And do these tax breaks still make sense? Because we're foregoing revenue where we can't pay for other things because we're hoping that those work out. So I think that's a top priority.
Now, you mentioned accountability, and you know that in government there's accountability to go around everywhere, but there's also wasteful spending within these government agencies. We know that in the Commonwealth, and especially here in the First Essex District, there are schools that are operating underperformance. How would you demand accountability if you're elected?
Well, specifically in terms of public schools, I know in my city, every year on the council, we see that our budgets fall short a couple of $1 million year in and year out. And sometimes the physical facilities take a hit. Sometimes the amount of teachers you can afford takes a hit. Sometimes you can't offer instruction that you know is going to benefit the students, and that has a huge impact when students are only in there for a small amount of time. So we know that the budget shortfalls happen again and again and again. I think that, specifically in terms of public education, there's two problems. One is, what they call Chapter 70 funding, and that formula is broken because we're up against a system where it's way too reliant on property taxes. And working and middle-class people, seniors on fixed incomes, they pay their fair share, and they're put in this awkward position where they can't afford anymore, but yet we still can't meet our educational standards. So that means the money has to come from somewhere else. And the only way to really solve the statewide educational issue is to increase the overall state funding for public education. So that's two things. It needs to be fair in terms of how cities and towns are assessed, but overall, there needs to be more funding.
Now, many people will argue that most cities and towns are completely broke, yet they are forced to pay 3 times the amount to have projects done. Would you support legislation that would require Massachusetts to be a right-to-work state?
I don't think so. I always have an inkling in terms of how I feel about an issue, but that being said, I always want to know my facts and have an informed opinion on this. At first blush, I think before voters have confidence in government spending, they want to make sure there's no waste. I think that in principle, the public wants to support the concept of unions, collective bargaining, workers' rights, workers' safety. These are principles that our residents value. They just want to see, like everything else, they don't want to see a system being abused. And it's the responsibility of the elected officials to demonstrate that's not happening. First, make sure it's not happening, and then demonstrate this is why this makes sense.
Well, now, we also know that the Methuen, not just Methuen, but the high schools right now, we have vocational schools. Would you like to see the high schools in Methuen adopt sort of like a vocational type of training so the children that cannot afford to go to college at least do have some type of training in the vocational level, but starting at the high school level as well? Would that be something that will benefit the families and children of the Commonwealth?
I think that there is a place for vocational schools in terms of the strong, unique programming they offer for students that are interested in that track. I think that the current public high school curriculum really has its work cut out for them in meeting those basic standards. That's how I feel. You know, in terms of foreign language, it's certainly in most cities and towns in our district, it's not strong enough to equip our students to be competitive in the workforce. In terms of athletic programming, most parents are in a position where they have to help pay to have their children participate in athletics. You know, all of these extracurriculars, you know, whether it's field trips or art and music, we're already struggling to adequately fund that so that children have an adequate education, and I think those need to be our initial priorities.
Now, we've seen what happened with the Big Dig. We bailed out the MBTA as well up in Boston. How much debt do you think the Commonwealth can afford to take on?
I think what we truly have in that instance is a debt structuring problem, where the MBTA in particular is saddled with this debt. And there is always a place for reducing waste and redundancy and improving efficiencies, but this is a situation where it's not entirely fair to place the vast majority of the burden on the MBTA to deal with this. And then what inevitably happens is that ripple effect falls on the backs of the users of these services. And to me, it's the most clear example of how we need to reprioritize, because there's nothing more important right now in terms of helping people that are looking for jobs, need to get to hospitals, want to go to classes, don't want to congest our highways for the other people getting to jobs. It's the exact wrong direction for us to say we're going to boost the cost of using this, it's going to be more expensive to park, and we're going to reduce services. We need to go in a completely opposite direction and say, we need to restructure the debt so that the rates stay what they are. You know, an example like the ride, you know, where it's our most vulnerable citizens and rates went up 100%. To me, that's mixed priorities, and we need to look at investing in restructuring that debt as part of a solution for economic stimulation.
Now, many people will argue that Beacon Hill is full of attorneys up there. You mentioned that you are also an attorney. Now, do you see attorneys voting on legislation that may impact their own practice? Do you see that as a conflict of interest?
I would not be personally in that predicament. I don't have my own law practice. So I would never have that personal conflict of interest and would have a clear conscience voting on these issues. I feel like it's a double-edged sword, because you're going to have some state senators and reps who have valuable expertise in helping to make these decisions and offer input because they're complicated issues. But perhaps in those instances where it's clear that it's not about being knowledgeable about a topic, but it's about personally benefiting from the outcome, then someone should abstain from that topic.
Now, let me ask you this. Would you support legislation that would require all legislators, the same laws that apply to the citizens of the Commonwealth apply to the legislators?
Yes.
So would you support that type of
legislation? I would. I don't see any drawback in doing that.
Great, I appreciate that. Now, what are you hearing from your constituents as you go door to door?
I'm hearing a couple of things. One, a lot of folks don't realize there's an election happening, and that it's on a Thursday, September 6th, because a lot of folks are in summer mode right now, and that's justifiable. But the other nice thing, once they're realizing, oh yeah, you know, someone is going to fill that seat that was recently held by Senator Bador, they're very open-minded. And that is exciting because I really want to present to the voters an alternative to what they might think is either the status quo or it doesn't make a difference. And what I want to hit home to folks is who that state senator is impacts their lives in a very real way, just as much as their city councilor or a selectman. And that person needs to be someone that they can feel as comfortable calling and picking up the phone as they would their district councilor or their ward councilor.
Now, we know that the governor and the Commonwealth just vetoed the welfare reform for the EBT cards. Mm-hmm. Do you think he did the right thing by vetoing that piece of legislation in regards to the reform that many people think it's actually being abused out there with the EBT cards?
I think what it came down to was a disagreement on strategy, and what is agreed upon is that there are basic measures that need to be taken to prevent obvious fraud. I think that there was a disagreement in terms of strategy. Are we going to block the types of goods, or are we going to block particular types of stores and outlets? But I don't think that anyone is going to say that there isn't an issue that has to be resolved, and that using these cards for things like tattoo parlors and salons and alcohol is something that needs to be stopped, so that the people that actually need that can use it and it doesn't become this controversial wedge issue.
Now, let me ask you a personal question. What is a relaxing day for Kathleen O'Conner Ives?
That's a good question. They're not really common nowadays, but I think it would involve, I have a little Chihuahua named Mo. We got him at Nevin's farm. And it would be my husband Jeff, my dog Mo going for a walk, and just catching up with each other's lives. That would be my way to relax, because you know, that type of quality time is at a premium right now, and a little exercise wouldn't hurt too. So.
What's like your favorite dinner? What's your favorite dish that you look forward to coming home and just, oh, I want to just eat that right away?
It's not me cooking. It's a pizza and a beer. And my husband gets mad because I like to drink it out of the bottle. But that would be my ideal. Yeah.
Nice. Now, you mentioned that you met your husband in the campaign trail 12 years ago?
Yep.
What's the cheapest date he's ever taken you on?
Our first date. I'm going to blush. He took me to Denny's. Yep. And the funny thing is that I did not have a lot of resources, a lot of financial resources back then, and I hated to pay for gas. I was driving a Jalopy Grand Marquis, and I thought, how far can I get, right, without having to pay? So our first date, my car broke down the side of the road, and he was standing in the mall waiting for me with some flowers, and I didn't show up, and he thought I stood him up. And I called him, and I said, I'm on the side of the road, I need help. And he thought I was lying, and he's like, I'm not coming. And then he believed me, and I showed up, and then we went to Denny's.
Great.
So.
Now, the First Essex Street, it covers a lot of different areas, Methuen, North Andover. Is there a particular area where people can come out and see you, or do you have events planned, or how can people get a hold of you and want to contribute to your campaign, or just wants to reach out and ask you questions about your candidacy? Absolutely.
The easiest thing to do is to find all my contact information on the website. They can reach me at voteforives.com. The other really great opportunity is there's a debate that's going to be happening here in Methuen at 6 o'clock on July 23rd. It happens to be my birthday, so it's a date I will not forget. And I think that'll be a real opportunity to, see the different candidates where they stand on the issues. I'm working throughout the district, and would love if anyone wants to contact me and invite me to an event, or they think I need to be somewhere or meet someone. I would love that opportunity. Because, with 6 weeks to go, there's a lot of work to do, and I need all the allies I can get.
Correct. I'm going to give you an opportunity to address your constituents. Let them know who Kathleen O'Conner Ives is and why you think you would make the best state senator for them to vote for you. If you don't mind looking at that.
No, this is my appeal. I'd really like to emphasize that I'm an independent voice, and I'm accountable to the residents. I think that my track record on the City Council is one of getting things done. And I know how to work with all different types of people. And in terms of being able to listen to the residents, I believe that there's a balance where it's the representative's job to listen to the concerns out in the district and then be that advocate. Because I believe whether you come from Newburyport, Amesbury, Methuen, Haverhill, what we have are more shared interests than anything else. And if we build a coalition of communities, leverage that, and then advocate on Beacon Hill, I know that we can get more done that way. I've done it in Newburyport. I want to do it district-wide, and I want to work hard for the residents. And, you know, in terms of who's going to be in that seat, I really do believe, you know, an open seat is a great opportunity for a fresh voice, new ideas. I think I bring a new perspective. And, you know, at this phase in the game, I really welcome residents contacting me. Let me know what issues are important to you. I want to hear that, and I want to be your voice up in Beacon Hill. So I appreciate the consideration and vote on September 6th.
Now, we also hear from previous state representatives and state senators who have appeared on the show that it's usually hard to work with the parties up in Beacon Hill. It usually takes about 10 years or so to actually get legislation done. How do you plan on working with these individuals up in Boston where nobody has been able to have success, basically?
Here's my strategy. I believe that not only do you have to take clear stands on the issues and priorities that are reflective of the district, there's also that responsibility for a state senator to communicate back to the district, here's what's going on, here are the issues, what do you think? And then figure out what the community wants to see happen. Because if the communication is a two-way street, I'm familiar with how representatives and senators, they take calls from the residents of the district, maybe versus not residents in the district. And if the residents feel like they know the issues that are being debated and they have a good sense of the arguments for why that state senator is doing what they do, they're going to call in and communicate and help you with that advocacy. And I think that you start to create a momentum where the leadership is in a position where they realize, wait a second, I was guessing that that was a dangerous position or the wrong position. I'm hearing from the people that they want this. So I think it's the job of a state senator to communicate back to the people in the district so they feel like they're well informed, they know what's going on, and they can help that representative take a stand and kind of move the needle over to a position that more accurately reflects what the public wants.
Now, I know that in Beacon Hill, legislators tend to file legislation as a courtesy for their constituents. So if a constituent came up to a legislator, they would hand them legislation that they would like to have worked on or so on. Now, most legislators don't tend to put their name on the actual bill. They just submit it on behalf of that constituents. Would you sponsor any type of legislation that any constituents of yours brought to you without leaving the impression that, well, I'm not going to sponsor this, which many people will say sends a red flag to the rest of the legislators that, hey, you know, I'm submitting this because I have to, not because I support it. Would you support legislation that any constituents of yours may bring to you as far as reform, changing of wordings, or so on?
I appreciate that question, and my tendency is to do something similarly to what I did on the Newburyport City Council, which is that a resident can't present a piece of legislation without at least one councilor sponsoring it. And I get contacted, sponsor this, sponsor that. I sponsor things that I support. Every councilor has a different style. Some councilors will just put their name on something because they want it to go out there. My personal style is I want to work with the constituent, and perhaps sometimes I agree right away. Sometimes I don't actually understand the intent behind something, and we have to work together to figure out what's your objective, what's your goal. And then sometimes we're not on the same page, and I'll just say, you know what? I can refer you to a counselor that might be in a better position to advocate for that. Because what I like to do is sponsor something and then be able to stand up on the council floor and then start that debate and speak to it. And that's something that I'm more comfortable with. And I have no problem at all kind of matching a resident concern with the right city councilor.
Great. And if you were to be elected, how open and transparent will you be with all your constituents?
That is a critical aspect of my whole campaign, because a priority for me as a state senator would be not only transparency, but campaign finance reform, lobbying and ethics reform, because that is an issue that without improvement trickles down and diminishes the effectiveness of every other aspect of our representative democracy.
What about open meeting laws and public records, the right to people to know what their government is doing? I agree.
We're subject to that as city councilors, and I think that that would make everything more effective if it happened on Beacon Hill. I don't see the downside of that. I think that we'd have an electorate that feels like they're more in the loop in terms of why decisions are made, and I think it can only serve to help, so I would support that.
Great. Well, and then once again, I just want to go back to how do people contact you if they want to help you out, donate to your campaign? Once again, if you don't mind just giving out your Facebook page, your phone number,
sure,
however they can reach
Absolutely.
you.
So my phone number at the campaign is 978-462-0678, and the address for the campaign is 1 Inn Street, INN, Suite number 8 in Newburyport, 01950. The website is voteforives.com, and on the website you'll have access to my Facebook page, and we're posting things very frequently.
Great, and we thank you for coming in and talking about your candidacy for the First Essex District. I want to thank you guys at home for watching. You've been watching Behind the Scenes. Join us next time as we go behind the scenes to ask the tough questions, bring you their responses. We let you decide. Thank you for joining us.